This is Democracy Watch. All right, so Mark, Jack Smith has dismissed the charges against Trump, and the request was accepted by Judge Chutkan in D.C. There has been some focus on the fact that, per Jack Smith's request, Chutkan did dismiss the case without prejudice. So first off, explain why that's significant here.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So when a case is dismissed with prejudice, what it means is it can't be brought again. Okay, so it is with prejudice against bringing the charges in the future. When it is dismissed without prejudice, what the government is saying is, we want this indictment dismissed. We want this case dismissed, but we want the ability in the future to refile charges and to bring a case again. In other words, the future case would not be prejudiced by the fact that there was an earlier case. It would not prevent us from bringing this case. And you know what this indicates is that Jack Smith wants to hold out the possibility, whether that is a likelihood or a remote possibility, who knows. Things have been very weird lately, in case you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
But he wants to hold out the possibility, at least, that down the road, when Donald Trump leaves office, one way or another, that that these charges could be reinstituted and the trial could move forward.
Well, I know folks are pretty disillusioned with the justice system right now. So to what extent do you think the fact that this case was dismissed without prejudice, thereby preserving the ability for the DOJ to bring it up again in the future, to what extent do you think it matters at this point?
Look, count me among the people disillusioned by the justice process. You know,
Yeah.
I have been saying, and you and I have been talking about this for months, that the courts failed. I mean, I said the courts failed before the election, before all of this, when it comes to holding Donald Trump accountable.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is that he, at every stage, he has gotten special treatment. He got special treatment in how long it took Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice to go after him. He got special treatment in his ability to consistently attack judges and federal prosecutors and witnesses and face no real consequences. You know, I said this before. If a 25-year-old guy was arrested for distributing drugs and he attacked judges the way Donald Trump did, he would have been thrown in jail.
Yeah.
If he attacked witnesses the way Donald Trump did, he would have been thrown in jail and probably charged with witness tampering. You know, and so Donald Trump has gotten special treatment, and everyone's focused on the Supreme Court as the ultimate special treatment, and that's true. I mean, the immunity decision by the Supreme Court was wrong. It was wrong. It's dangerous for democracy. It is a form of special treatment, but the system has failed the American people from start to finish when it comes to the prosecutions of Donald Trump. And so, does it matter that it is without prejudice? A little bit. Like there is that remote possibility, but let's not let that cloud our view of what has happened here, which is an absolute failure of the criminal justice system, of the judiciary, of the prosecutorial system to work for Donald Trump like it does for every other American.
Something that we have a little bit higher of likelihood of seeing is this report from Jack Smith. So do you think that the public is ever going to have the opportunity to see an unredacted, uncompromised version of Jack Smith's final report to the Attorney General?
So look, there are only two people who will decide that. One's name is Jack Smith and the other's name is Merrick Garland. Okay, that's it, right? Like ultimately, Jack Smith has to write a report and send it to the Attorney General. The Attorney General then has a discretion whether or not to release that report. Okay, so those are your two pivot points here.
Yeah.
So will we see the report? We certainly should. Should we see the report? We must see the report. Will we see the report? I believe Jack Smith will write the report. Right. And Merrick Garland has said he will release the report. But you know what? I will believe it when that report is sitting on my desk, having been printed out. That's right. I'm a Gen X guy. I print stuff out.
I was just going to say, now we have to explain what a printer is to all the Gen Z viewers. Mark, do you think that the situation would have been different here, speaking of Merrick Garland, if Garland didn't wait until November of 2022 to appoint Jack Smith, when Biden took office nearly 2 years prior to that?
Yeah, it would have been different. It would have been different because things would have moved faster. And it would have been different because a lot of the the ways in which Donald Trump worked the system, the ways in which Donald Trump was able to manipulate the system, had to do with the fact that he was a candidate.
Right.
And he would not have been a candidate until after the midterm elections. Or, I mean, he could have said he was a candidate, but it wouldn't have had the same impact, right? He would not have been in the middle of an active election cycle. Not that I think, by the way, those things should have mattered. I don't think those things should have mattered. And in defense of Merrick Garland, it should have been enough time from 2022 to the present. You know, that was enough time. But if you ask me, would it have been different if it had been sooner? Yeah, it would have been different if it was sooner. And also, by the way, you know, it's not clear to me that there even needed to be a special counsel. The Department of Justice could have brought this case.
Right. I mean, like in theory, that is Merrick Garland's job, is to prosecute cases without fear or favor. And it didn't matter if Donald Trump was a candidate or not, because then anybody, any murderer, any white collar criminal can just declare his or her candidacy for office, and then that suddenly creates some obstacle for the top law enforcement official in America to be able to go forward and prosecute them?
Yeah, I think we tend to reflect on that statement, the favor part, and we don't spend enough time on the fear part, right? We sort of assume that the prosecutors are fearless, and that the concern we have is that they will do things as a favor.
Right.
I think what we experienced here was fear. Now, it may not have been fear of Donald Trump, you know, retaliation or vengeance or physical violence or the traditional kinds of fears. But what it was, I think, is a fear that people would criticize the Department of Justice for not being even-handed to Donald Trump. Okay, let me be honest with you. There is not a single criminal defendant in America who believes the prosecutors were even-handed towards them. So why did Donald Trump saying, I will claim they're not being even-handed to me? Why was that enough to create a fear of perception? And, you know, so when we talk about, you know, prosecutions without fear or favor, you know, I think that we have seen some real fears in bringing these cases more aggressively and more quickly. Again, not that Donald Trump, not fear. I don't want people to misconstrue this. I'm not saying that prosecutors pulled their punches because they were physically unsafe or because they gave in to an irrational fear or even a rational fear of retribution. It is rather that Donald Trump created a reality in which his supporters said any prosecution of Donald Trump is illegitimate. And the fear was that those people would continue to believe that.
Right.
Well, I got a message to you guys. They're going to believe that anyway.
Correct. They started a subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. They literally moved forward in Congress as if Donald Trump was being illegitimately prosecuted. So it didn't matter that Merrick Garland conferred onto the Trump team all of this goodwill, because it didn't prevent the Trump team from doing anything other than what they would have done if this was some type of politicized prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the world in which we live, the moment we live in history, the time we live in history, is that Donald Trump and his supporters only believe the legal system is a validator for them or is to be manipulated and discredited. So, you know, if there's an election and they lose, they claim fraud. If there's an election, they win, they say everything was fine. And if you raise any questions about it, they say you're an election denier, right? Like, they have found a way to weaponize every aspect of the legal system. And so for just in my area where I litigate voting and election cases, like, I just tune them out. Like, I know they're, no matter what I do, they're not going to agree. They're going to think I was too late, I was too early, I was too aggressive, I wasn't aggressive enough, I was counting too many votes, I wasn't counting enough votes. Like, there's nothing I'm ever going to do that Donald Trump or his ilk, his band of vote suppressors and election deniers, that they're ever going to agree with. So I just don't let it influence me. I think that the part of the problem we had was that there, in the effort to appear impartial, you give a veto to people who are not acting in good faith. Right. And I think for all of the good, and I believe Merrick Garland's a good man. I don't think he did this intentionally. I don't think he did this for ill reasons, I should say. But I think that ultimately he did not catch on to the game they were playing, or he thought even if they were playing that game, he needed to rise
above it, take the high road. Yeah. Well, that was absolutely perfectly put, and you have been, a champion in terms of putting this type of analysis forward, especially on Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet you founded to focus on everything voting and elections. For people who are, and we're seeing this more and more, fleeing legacy media, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. If you want to cover legal news, voting rights news, election news, that is the best outlet out there. So I'll put the link right here on the screen and also on the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
Case dismissal without prejudice. Special counsel Jack Smith dismissed charges against Donald Trump, and Judge Chuck can approve the dismissal without prejudice. A dismissal without prejudice allows the possibility of refiling the case in the future, unlike dismissal with prejudice. Potential future prosecution. This decision preserves the option to pursue the case after Trump leaves office, though the likelihood remains uncertain. The legal system's perceived failure to hold Trump accountable has disillusioned many observers. Criticism of legal inequality. Trump allegedly received preferential treatment, such as delays in prosecution and leniency for attacking judges, prosecutors, and witnesses. Comparisons were made to how ordinary citizens would have faced harsher consequences under similar circumstances. Supreme Court's role. The Supreme Court's decision granting Trump immunity was criticized as unjust and dangerous to democracy, reflecting systemic failures in holding him accountable. Jack Smith report. The public's access to an unredacted version of Smith's final report depends on Jack Smith and Attorney General Merrick Garland. While Garland has promised transparency, skepticism remains about whether the report will be fully disclosed. Timing of special counsel appointment. Delays in appointing Jack Smith in November 2022 allowed Trump to manipulate the system during his candidacy. Critics argue the Department of Justice should have acted sooner and without the need for a special counsel. Impact of fear on prosecution. The Justice Department was criticized for acting out of fear, not of Trump himself, but of public perception and accusations of bias. This perceived hesitation hindered the timely and effective pursuit of justice. Trump's exploitation of the system. Trump and his supporters manipulate the legal system to suit their narrative, discrediting it when unfavorable and validating it when favorable. The persistence of this tactic complicates efforts to enforce accountability. Need for impartiality without capitulation. Overcompensating to appear impartial allowed bad faith actors to exploit the system. Garland, despite good intentions, may have underestimated these tactics. Call to action. Listeners were encouraged to follow Democracy Docket for reliable coverage of legal, voting, and election news.